talk about sound, which is one of the most fun things for me to talk about. Um, I love sound. Sound can really do a ton of work to make your environment feel interesting, unique, real. And there's a lot to it, and we'll start to crack some of that today. And yeah, we'll get into a couple different things. We're going to place a sound into our VR template, which you can see here on the screen. Um, it's going to be an environmental sound. An environmental sound is a sound that you hear in the world. It's not, some people think of it as, some people think of it as like an ambient sound or something like that. It's not a sound that's going to happen necessarily because of a physical action or something like that. It's going to be just a sound out in the environment, something you might hear walking your dog or taking a walk with a friend or being in your house and hearing something happening in the background or something like that. All right. So we already have a sound in our environment in the VR template, and that sound is a fire. And if you click on that little icon that's a speaker right there, you can see there's a thing called, it says Fire Cue. And a thing that can be really useful is this, if you right click and do Browse to Asset. And Browse to Asset is going to take you down here into the content browser. Oh, by the way, if you don't know what the content browser is, that's totally great, no problem. Your environment might look like this. Content browser is down here in the lower left. Go ahead and click on it, and that will open it up. And you'll notice we are not any longer in the folder we were in before. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on Fire Cue again and say Browse to Asset. And now you can see the content drawer is open, and here it is. Now I'm going to do a thing that many people do if they spend quite a bit of time in Unreal Engine, which is I'm going to dock and layout. And dock and layout will stick the content browser at the bottom down here. That's because you'll actually spend quite a bit of time down here in all these folders as you become more proficient in Unreal Engine, doing stuff, adding cool sound files, adding 3D assets, etc. Okay, so again, what I'm going to do is do right-click, Fire Cue, Browse to Asset. Oh, let's see. Oh, that's annoying. Well, anyway, here's what we're going to do. That asset is in Starter Content. No, it's in the VR template, and it's in Audio, and there it is, Fire Cue. Notice there's two files here. There's a file called Fire Cue, and a file here called Fire01. This is the actual audio file. This is the cue, and let's talk about what the difference between those are. The audio file is just the sound itself, right? It's a WAV file. It's not an MP3. WAV files end in .wav, and we'll talk about that. And the cue is a way for you to do stuff with the sound in Unreal Engine. Maybe you need to adjust the volume, adjust the pitch, these sorts of things. Let you manipulate the sound. It also lets you kind of define how the sound works in your environment. And we're going to mess around with the cue some. It also lets you spatialize your sound, meaning as you walk away from it, it gets quieter. As you walk towards it, it gets louder. And we'll do that today as well. So you've already got one in here. If you've walked around the VR template, you've felt this, right? The fire doesn't crackle outside the room, and that's because the Fire Cue is controlling what is called the attenuation. And attenuation is just a fancy word meaning the closer you get to something or the further away, the sound changes, right? So if you get closer, the attenuation says as you get closer, make it louder to a point, right? Like if you stand 6 feet from a fire and then you stand 3 feet from a fire, the sound doesn't change that much, right? But if you stand 6 feet from a fire and then you move all the way back to, say, 4 or 5 meters or 8 or 9 meters or 20, 30 feet, it really drops off, right? So that's what attenuation means. And we're going to create a new sound, and we're going to create kind of an annoying sound, which will be fun. There's a couple different places I go for sounds. I really like BBC Sound Effects. It's a cool website. If you go to soundeffects sound-effects.bbcrewind.co.uk, or if you just search for BBC sound effects, you'll get here. It's a really cool database. Excuse me. So if you did something like crowd cheering, you get all these cool crowd cheering sounds, and you could check out the different ones and see which ones you like. Today we're going to go to freesound. This is freesound.org. Freesound.org, I will say the site has been a little dodgy lately, so we'll see how this goes. Hopefully the pages load okay and all that. And what I'm going to type is I'm going to type cricket indoor. And for those of you in Europe and the UK, cricket is a sport, but it is also a tiny bug. And that's the thing we're going to do today is we're going to add the tiny bug sound. So I'm going to hit search for cricket indoor. And here's cricket indoors. And I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And notice it's asking me to log into download, so you will need to create an account, which is a little annoying, but maybe also understandable because bots and stuff probably scrape this site a ton. So I'm going to click on login to download. I already have an account. You'll need to create one if you don't have one. And hopefully it will let me log in. Like I said, it's been a little buggy the past few days. Okay, and here it is. This is your sound. You can preview it, check it out. And what you really want to do is download it. And one thing you'll notice while it's downloading, yeah, it's going down right now, is it says down here type wave, and that's good. That means we don't need to convert it from something like an MP3 to this wave file format. You can see it's about 7 megs. It's 25 seconds long, and the sample rate is 48,000 hertz. And the bit depth is 24, and channels is stereo. Stereo sound, right, means not only is it coming into both ears, but both ears can be treated differently. So you can hear a slightly different sound or drastically different sound in your left versus your right channel. Mono sounds you still might hear in both speakers, but it's the same waveform. It's the same sound going into both your left and right ear. So let's go ahead and check out the download. That's not what we want to do. We don't want to open it up in Apple Music. I'm going to go to the folder. And I am going to move it into my desktop. And here it is. And we have to do some work to this WAV file. And we'll talk about what that work's going to be. One of the things we need to do is it's already a WAV file, which is great, but we need to convert this to 41,000 hertz instead of 48,000 hertz. Unreal Engine, in my experience, does not like these 48,000 hertz files. We also need to convert the bit depth from 24-bit to 16-bit. You'll hear this often called CD audio. Compact discs have a sample rate of 41,000 hertz at 16 bits, so we need to convert our we also need to convert it from stereo to mono. Now, we don't need to convert it to mono for Unreal Engine to work right, but there's some upsides for it to be mono. Because stereo is 2 channels, if we convert it to 1 channel, the file size is going to be roughly half as big. So we'll get it down from 7 meg to something smaller, and smaller is always, almost always better. Because we need to load it into our VR headset and that sort of thing, and so we want it to be performant. The other thing is, right, this is a cricket chirp, so we don't really need it to be fancy, right? It can be the same sound in our ears, and that'll be fine. So I think converting it to mono is just more appropriate to this sound. Okay, so we've got it downloaded. Here it is. Now we need to edit it. And there's a great free editor called Audacity. So if you search for the word Audacity, Audacity, it is a free tool that you can use to manipulate sound, and millions of people use this tool. It's quite good. I will say, though, Audacity has been a little weird. There's this thing called MuseHub that is not something we particularly care about. So go ahead and download it without MuseHub. Use this link down here, not this link here. Some people have been kind of sketched out by the MuseHub stuff. That's all I'll say about that. So go ahead and click the download button. Also, Audacity works on Windows. It works on Linux. It works on Mac as well. Okay, so here is our installer. And what we want to do is just, if you're new to Mac installers, again, this will also work on Windows with the Windows installer, but if you're on a Mac, just drag it into applications. I've already got it installed, but I'm going to go ahead and replace it just for this purpose. Oh, I've actually got it running here. Let me kill it. Okay, now I'm going to drag it in. And it says, hey, do you want to replace? Say yes. You may not need to log in, but I do in order to install stuff. Okay, and then the fastest thing on a Mac, especially to get to applications, is now you can just double click this folder. And here it is. And so we're going to go ahead and open it. It wants to allow access to the microphone. That's just so you can record sound into Audacity if you want to. I'm going to click allow here. And let's see. Here, or we can say don't show this again at startup because we've already got our, we know what's up with this thing. This is MuseHub over here. Again, it's a kind of promo for MuseHub. We're not going to use that at all. So we'll just hit OK here. And now what we need to do is bring in this audio file into Audacity. So the easiest way to do that is to say file open. We're going to pick our Cricket chirp here. And here it is. And you'll notice this waveform, this is a visualization of the audio, is telling you it's really quiet, right? So you want to make it louder. That way you can easily hear it in your VR experience. And also, one thing that'll happen is you'll have all these audio files, and if they're all kind of mixed levels, it becomes a giant pain to know how much to boost those levels in Unreal Engine. So I often try to make my audio files all kind of the same, roughly the same volume, so that I can just adjust that volume in Unreal. I don't have to adjust the volume in not knowing kind of what my starting place is. So the easiest way to do that is to do Effect, Volume and Compression, Amplify. Oh, we didn't select our file. What it's telling us here is to select this audio file first. So I'm going to select it. Now do you see it's highlighted? Now if we go Effect, Volume and Compression, Amplify. What's cool about Audacity is it's sort of telling you, I bet you want to make it, kind of normally loud, meaning the highest peaks in the waveform of the audio are going to max out at the top up here. And so it needs to boost it by roughly 31.5 dB or decibels. And so we're going to go ahead and apply there because they're correct. And that is pretty good. And what they're saying right is it boosted. Notice it's peaking right there at the top and right there at the bottom almost. You don't want to have too many peaks because it makes your sound distorted, and we don't want that. So now, like I said, we need to convert this to mono, meaning we don't need a left channel and a right channel. That's why we're seeing two of the same thing, or two of almost the same thing. Now, actually, no, check this out. Do you see this right here? How this one is slightly smaller than this one here? That's because in stereo, right, it's not the same sound, but it's almost the same sound, and it gives it a richness. But you can see here, right, like this is a little bit quieter on the left channel than here on the right channel, and then this is a little bit quieter here and here. And you'll notice these, and this one is like a little bit louder here than here, but then, and et cetera, here, here, and here. So that's just the difference between stereo and mono. So let's go ahead and do File, Export Audio, and we're going to get to do some things. Again, we're going to always do export to computer. We're never going to share to audio.com. So I'm going to say, don't show this again, and I'm going to say export to computer. And here's where we can do some conversion that we need to do. So we're going to check mono because we want mono. We're going to pick our sample rate of 44,100 here, 44,100 hertz instead of 48, which we had before. And we want 16-bit. Notice, remember before it was, I think, 24-bit. So we always want 16-bit. So we want 16-bit, 44.1 mono. And we're going to export the entire thing. And we're going to call it something useful to us. Again, just for consistency's sake, don't put any spaces in here. Just use dashes or underscores if you want. So I'm going to do Cricket Indoors. And I'm going to say 44.1. 16 mono. And I do that just so I know when I have a whole pile of wave files, which ones I've converted and which ones I haven't. So I'm going to hit export, and again, it's going to be on our desktop, so we'll check our desktop there. Actually, yeah, that's good. Okay, so we've added it to our desktop, and we can see we don't need to save the changes here, so I'm going to hit no, and you can see now this is the file right here that we've created. So now we've done our work in Audacity. Very good, very good. We need to add it to our project. So let's do this. You may not have done this before. Right now we're in our content folder, and what we can do is just create a new folder here, and we'll call it sound effects. Again, it's good practice not to add spaces. So we'll just make it called sound effects, a folder here called sound effects inside our content folder. And then we're just going to go back to our Finder, and if you're in Windows, this is Windows Explorer, and we're just going to drag it in. And there it is. And you notice we have this little waveform here. You can actually click and play it and hear what it sounds like, which is nice if you have a ton of these in here and you don't remember what they all sound like. It's really useful. Now, like I said before, we need to create a thing called a cue. So the easiest way to create a cue is to just right-click on the wave file and do create cue here. And so now we have our cue. You can rename it. I name them the same. That way I know they're sort of siblings, right? We should always have one and another. So I'm just going to leave it the same name. And the cue is what we're going to drag into our VR experience. We're not going to drag the file. The file, again, doesn't have any of the information that Unreal needs to know what to do with it. So it's really a source file, right? So we're going to take our cue file and we're going to drag it in. And I'm going to drag it over here kind of to the left of this little block back here. We have our fire here, but now we're going to have our sound cue back here. Now we have some work to do in our cue. This is crickets, right? And if you've ever had a cricket in your house, you know that they just keep going nonstop. It just loops over and over and over. Audio cues, when you first create them, don't loop. So it would play once and then stop. And that can be useful. But for us, we want it to loop also because when the player walks up on the cricket, we want it to already be playing. So the easiest way to do that is just double click on the cue and you get all sorts of parameters here. And what you want to do is add a looping function here. You can see we've got looping here in the sound node. And what we're going to do here is add this loop in our node editor. So we're going to do right click, and you'll notice there's looping right there. Boom. So right now we have our wave player, right? And it's going to the output, which is for me, my headphones, but for you, it's going to be, the headset, whatever it is. And so we need to break this link here, break the link, and we're going to take our output to our loop function and then do output to here. Yeah, and now what we have is we've said, hey, always loop this as it's going to our sound output, to our speaker. So we are in good shape there. We can just close that out. And then what we need to do is do some cool tricks to make this cricket sound more believable. So let's go down here. Again, this is our details panel in Unreal. Let me make it a little bit taller so we can see all the stuff. And there's all sorts of cool stuff here. You can also get to this stuff by double clicking the cue and modifying it here. And there's reasons for doing it either way. For me, for sound, I like doing it in the right-hand side, and I'll show you why. So the first thing we want to do is, you'll notice we have allow spatialization check. That means let it be affected by the environment, or let it be, a 3D sound, right? Like it's not just playing. Like in some video games, right? When you first load the game, you just have this like backing soundtrack, and that sound is just playing nonstop in the background, irrespective of you walking around or something. And we're creating an environmental sound, so we want that sound to be in the world. We don't want it to just be like a backing track. So allow spatialization is good for us. And what we want to do is we want to override attenuation. Um, you can actually do things like create attenuation profiles and save settings and do a bunch of stuff. But for now, we're just going to do one simple thing, which is called override attenuation. And that is going to let us adjust the attenuation of the sound. Again, attenuation is how loud the sound is or how the sound is affected by distance. So the first thing we need to think about are this inner radius here. The inner radius is how many units is this sort of sphere of hearing it, right? So if you imagine you're walking into this sphere, this orange sphere, you're in the inner radius and you're hearing the sound at full volume. But then there's this thing called the fall-off distance, and the fall-off distance is the outer radius. So as you walk away from it, you should eventually stop hearing it. And we are in a room, right? And so one of the things that we do with sound when you think about a cricket, right, is you may not hear that sound here. You probably wouldn't in the world, right? But you would in here. And so what we want to do is adjust that outer radius. I'm going to show you how big the current outer radius is. The current outer radius is this outer sphere here, and it is huge. So right now you could hear this cricket all the way out here. It would be quieter, but it would still be present. And so what we want to do, I'm just going to zoom back in, is adjust this outer radius, this fall-off distance, down to a much more manageable number. And you're going to see this sphere come towards us when I get just about here, 1400 maybe. Is it? Yeah, there we go. I was way off, around 400. Oh yeah, because it's much bigger than that. Okay, so you can see right here, we've got this outer sphere. I'm going to actually back up a little bit. And I think I want to make it just about to where you get to the fire. So when you come in the room at first, you're not going to hear it, but you will hear it pretty soon after you step in. That'll give us a safe amount of distance. So cool. We're definitely going to hear the sound here. We're going to hear it a little bit here. That's rocking. That's going to be good. But we have a fun little issue to deal with. And that issue is let's bust through this wall. Notice that this sphere appears on the outside of the building. And sound doesn't work like that, does it? So if we were outside this building, the cricket sound should go away because the block wall would be blocking it. So what we need to do, is go down here and select enable occlusion. And occlusion is something we think about often in the visual world, right? Like right now, my hands are occluding my face. So you can't see my face because my hands are occluding it. Now my hands are no longer occluding it. And sound works the same way, right? So we want this wall to occlude this sound when we're on the other side of it. And we just check the box and it's doing it. But there's one little trick. Right now, do you see it says occlusion volume attenuation is 1? That means no change, even though we turned it on. So what we're going to do is we're going to set that to 0. And by setting that to 0, we're saying if something is occluding it, turn the sound off. And a cricket, right, does not have a super loud voice. I mean, it's loud in a way, but it's not, it's not like kick and bass or something. So we're not going to hear the muffled sound of a cricket on the other side of a wall. Where if it was a nightclub with, a subwoofer, we would hear the muffled sound. And you can actually do muffling and stuff. It's really cool in Unreal. But for now, we're just going to do the cricket. So now we have a cricket sound. We have the sphere that we know we're going to hear it. We have the outer sphere where we're going to hear it, but it's going to be quieter. And we're blocking this back. We're blocking the sound with this back block. So now all we need to do is build the project and then check it out in VR. So before we do that, let's just do save all. And because we're building for the Meta Quest 2, we're going to go to Platforms, Android, Package Project. And I've already made a folder here. I just made a folder called Cricket Chirp. That way we know where our project is. And again, this Android ASTC file directory, is going to get built when we do the build. But for now, I'll move to the trash. That way Unreal has a clean path. And we'll go ahead and do the build. And then we'll check out the experience.